think this is around 279. In the chapter The Thief, they've left the Ministry of Magic. They have the locket, which Harry is wearing, and somewhere around 279, I believe it is, possibly 278 or 280. Harry's thinking about Horcruxes. And a paragraph begins, there were other Horcruxes out there somewhere, but he did not have the faintest idea where they could be. He did not even know what all of them were. Meanwhile, he was at a loss to know how to destroy the only one that they had found, the Horcrux that currently lay against the bare flesh of his chest. Curiously, it had not taken heat from his body, but lay so cold against his skin, it might just have emerged from icy water. Nice little bit of foreshadowing there, by the way. Some icy water that's going to come up later. But also, the idea that it doesn't take heat from his body, but rather it kind of, I don't want to say instills, pushes coldness. A couple paragraphs down, his scar is hurting. And now it's really burning, we're told. Harry's scar is burning now. He thought there was so much they did not know. Lupin had been right about magic they had never encountered or imagined. Why hadn't Dumbledore explained more? Okay? And Harry starts thinking, maybe he thought he would have plenty of years. And then he has the vision. He sees Gregorovitch with Voldemort and such. I'm not going to say anything else about that. Chapter 15, Goblet's Revenge. About 2 pages in, they're kind of bickering, and Hermione takes the locket off of Harry, or makes him take it off. And we're told, the paragraph begins, she held out her hands, and Harry lifted the golden chain over his head. The moment it parted contact with Harry's skin, he felt free and oddly light. Just an example of what was said earlier about Horcruxes, how the bit of soul inside can affect the wearer or the person it comes into contact with, okay? About a page later, or possibly on that same page, they're, kind of dotting around the countryside, and we're told it was much easier to relax when they were comfortably well fed. The argument about the Dementors was forgotten in laughter that night. Harry felt cheerful, even hopeful, as he took the first of the 3 night watches. That's all prelude to the part I want to emphasize. This was their first encounter with the fact that a full stomach meant good spirits, an empty one, bickering and gloom. Kind of find that interesting. Because it's a nice example or demonstration of an idea that Rowling, I'm trying to figure out how to put this, that Rowling introduces earlier in terms of, in book 5, we see them in the kitchen, which is described as surgically clean and everything. And at that point, Harry's 2 worlds get jammed together. And the way I kind of describe it or look at it is that it's this emphasis on, or this idea of introducing, linking the spiritual with material. Well, this is kind of the same thing, okay? And here's what I mean by it. It's indicating matter, this, has an influence on emotions, or, the body influences the soul or emotional well-being, and that also works vice versa the same way, which is why Harry's having to continually master himself. Notice, Harry was the least surprised by this because he had suffered periods of near starvation at the Dursleys. Hermione bore up reasonably, but who doesn't? Who has a problem with they're going hungry from time to time? Ron. Because he's used to Molly Weasley always preparing meals, having everything ready for them. Okay? So skip a few pages to 290. I think it's 290. And again, the year is kind of going by. It's now late autumn, okay, or autumn, and they're hungry again. Ron says one night, "My mother," said Ron one night, as they sat in a tent on a riverbank in Wales, "can make good food appear out of thin air." He prodded moodily at the lumps of charred gray fish on his plate. Harry glanced automatically at Ron's neck. He saw the golden chain. Ron's wearing the Horcrux, and Harry's kind of using that mentally to excuse Ron's behavior. It's the Horcrux that's making Ron speak this way, he thinks. He managed to fight down the impulse to swear at Ron, whose attitude would, he knew, improve slightly when the time came to take off the locket. "Hermione, your mother can't produce food out of thin air. No one can. Food is the law, first of the 5 principal exceptions to Gamp's law, blah, 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 blah. Ron, speak English. Hermione, it's impossible to make good food out of nothing. You can summon it if you know where it is. You can transform it, but you can't. Ron, well, don't bother increasing this. It's disgusting." Okay? And Hermione kind of teaches a little lesson. Harry caught the fish. I did my best with it. I notice I'm always the one who ends up sorting out the food because I'm a girl, I suppose. Ron, no, it's because you're supposed to be the best at magic. Okay? So what was Ron's, involvement in the meal that evening? Eating it, nothing. Okay? So they keep talking. They overhear some voices. And they listen to, the chapter is the Goblins of Revenge. They listen to Griphook. They listen to Dirk, can't remember his last name, Ted Tonks and such. And we hear, that was 290, 91, 92, 93, somewhere around 294, 295. We hear Dirk talk about Severus Snape and some kids who snuck into his office. "Didn't you hear about that, Ted?" asked Dirk, "about the kids who tried to steal Gryffindor's sword out of Snape's office at Hogwarts?" Never a word. Not in the Prophet. Okay? Skipping a little bit, we hear, one of the students, one of the kids, was Bill's younger sister. All right? Ginny. Okay? She and a couple of friends got into Snape's office, smashed open the case where he was apparently keeping the sword. Snape caught them. Ted Tonks. God bless him. What did they think? They'd be able to use the sword on you-know-who, Snape? They don't know. Okay? They keep talking about this, and one of them asks what happened to Ginny and the others. Okay? Find out Ted Tonks says they're okay. The Weasleys don't need any more of their kids injured, do they? A little bit of foreshadowing again. So, what do we find out happened to them? 302, I think it is. Bottom of the page, or somewhere on that page. Hermione's talking with Phineas Nigellus Black, photo that she stole from the school, or from the headquarters. And they're talking about Neville and Luna and Ginny and such. And Phineas Nigellus tells them Professor Snape sent them into the Forbidden Forest to do some work for the oaf Hagrid. Hagrid's not an oaf, said Hermione. And Snape might have thought that was a punishment, said Harry. But Ginny, Neville, and Luna probably had a good laugh with Hagrid. The Forbidden Forest, they faced plenty worse than the Forbidden Forest. Big deal. Okay? Is this significant? And if it is, why? What might it show us? Or what might Rowling be very subtly revealing?
Well, I think you would assume that Snape knows everything that they've been through, and that Forbidden Forest would be, well, for the same reason that Harry's thinking that the Forbidden Forest is pretty fine for them.
Yeah, I mean, is that a detention? Is that punishment? Not really, especially with Hagrid. I mean, maybe if he sent them in the Forbidden Forest with the Carrow twins,
yeah,
okay, then that would be something different, okay? So they talk about, the sword and stuff with Phineas Nigellus Black. And that's when they make the connection, the sword can destroy Horcruxes. A couple pages later. Goblin-made blades imbibe only that which strengthens them. Harry, that sword's impregnated with basilisk venom, because he stabbed it in the basilisk. And Dumbledore didn't give it to me because he still needed it. He wanted me to use it on the locket. So now they know if they could get the sword, they could destroy the locket. Or if they could find a basilisk fang, that would be another way. So they come to this conclusion, Snape put a false sword in the office. Okay? And then Ron blows up. Harry and Hermione are talking back and forth, each kind of finishing the other sentence, because they're figuring things out. Ron's just sitting there meanwhile, stewing. And he says, no, you two carry on, don't let me spoil your fun. And Harry and Hermione look at him like, okay, Harry, obviously you've got a problem, spit it out. Ron gets off the bed, he looks mean, unlike himself, okay? And he says, all right, I'll spit it out. Don't expect me to skip up and down the tent because there's some other damn thing we've got to find. Just add it to the list of stuff you don't know. Harry's like, whoa, what do you mean? Okay? Finally, skipping a lot of talking back and forth and Ron saying things he would probably later come to regret, Ron says, we're about as near getting rid of it, that is the one Horcrux they found, as we are to finding the rest of them. Nowhere effing near, in other words. Hermione, take off the locket, Ron. Hermione's assuming this is all because of the locket. Please take it off. You wouldn't be talking like this if you hadn't been wearing it all day. Harry, yeah, he would. And then Harry kind of turns on Hermione. I've heard you guys. You think I didn't guess you were thinking all this stuff? And Hermione's like, no. Okay. Several paragraphs down, Ron says, oh, you're sure, are you? Because they're talking about how, Ron's family has suffered and such. Right then, well, I won't bother myself about them. It's all right for you two. For you two, isn't it? With your parents safely out of the way. Okay. How are Hermione's parents safely out of the way?
They have memory charms. They have no clue that she exists.
She wiped their memories. Think about that for a moment. Is that an ethical act? Did she ask them first?
No, but it raises the question.
It raises an awful lot of questions. Okay? And what about Harry's parents? Harry says, my parents are dead. Ron, mine could be going the same way. Harry, go. Go. Okay? So Ron gets ready to go. He looks at Hermione. He's like, come on, let's go. And she's like, what do you mean? Are you staying? Yes, I'm staying. We said we'd go with Harry. We said we'd help. I get it. You choose him. Ron leaves. Chapter 16, Godric's Hollow. Hold on just 1 second. How many chapters are there? Okay. So they start to think about what has happened. Around 3:13. Okay. Harry's wrestling with everything Ron said, And we're told he could not hide it from himself. Ron had been right. Dumbledore had left him with virtually nothing. They had discovered one Horcrux, but they had no means of destroying it. The others were as unattainable as they had ever been. Hopelessness threatened to engulf him. He was staggered now to think of his own presumption in accepting his friend's offers to accompany him on this meandering, pointless journey. Meandering and pointless implies the journey has no destination. It has no end point. He knew nothing. He had no ideas, and he was constantly, painfully on the alert for any indication that Hermione, too, was about to tell him that she had had enough, that she was leaving. Okay? So he doesn't spend a lot of time, talking with Hermione. They each kind of stay in their own lane, so to speak. And we finally hear 100 pages, over 100 pages later, that Hermione's reading the Tales of Beedle the Bard, 3:16. So Harry goes up to her and says, I've been thinking. And then she asks Harry for help about something. There's this symbol. Harry says, I never took ancient runes. And then he realizes what the symbol is. Okay? It's what Xenophilius was wearing on his robe. He calls it Grindelwald's mark. Okay? They talk about it a bit. And then Harry says, again, skipping a few paragraphs, I want to go to Godric's Hollow. She says, yeah, I've been thinking about that too. We have to. Harry said, wait, do you hear me? Yes, you want to go to Godric's Hollow. I think we should. Okay? She says, the more likely it seems to be there. What? The sword, Harry. Dumbledore must have known you'd want to go back there. And I mean, Godric's Hollow is Godric Gryffindor's birthplace. Really? Harry's never read a history of magic. Okay? So she opens up the history of magic and she reads to him. And they talk about what Aunt Muriel said, Matilda Bagshot, and all that kind of stuff. Page 319. As Hermione talks, Harry thinks. He was about to go home, about to return to the place where he had had a family. It was in Godric's Hollow that, but for Voldemort, he would have grown up, spent every school holiday. He could have invited friends to his house. He might have even had brothers and sisters. It would have been his mother who had made his 17th birthday cake. The life he had lost had hardly ever seemed real to him at this moment, as at this moment when he was about to see the place where it had been taken from him. Okay? So he, just before going to bed, he pulls out the photo album that Hagrid had given him. And he looks at the images. He looks at the pictures. So, they go to Godric's Hollow. And they're kind of looking at it from a bit of a distance. And they see Christmas lights. It's snowing. And Harry hides the cloak. They walk along a little lane that leads them into the heart of the village, where they see the village square. And we're told, strung all around with colored lights, there was what looked like a war memorial in the middle, partly obscured by a wind-blown Christmas tree. You go into, I think it's safe to say you go into any town in England, and there's a war memorial to those who died in the Great War, World War I, and then usually there's either a second one right nearby, or that war memorial is added to for those who died from that town in the Second World War. Okay? Usually many more names in the first memorial than in the second one because of the numbers of men who died in World War I. Also, every little town, like every county seat in Tennessee, has a square. So the square goes like this, and you've got roads on either side, and often the square will have, it'll be like a park, and in the middle of it, and it'll have pathways that lead from the corners for some reason, and in the middle of it will be that war memorial. Okay? So, they're standing there, they see the war memorial, and Hermione says, 3:23, Harry, I think it's Christmas Eve. Is it? He'd been so, kind of busy and moving here and there, etc. He hadn't thought about the date. I'm sure it is. Hermione says, her eyes upon the church. They'll be in there, won't they? Your mom and dad? I can see the graveyard behind it. Notice that's interesting. It's an interesting way of putting it. They'll be in there, we're told, with her eyes upon the church. And then she mentions the graveyard. So when you first hear that in there, it sounds like they'll be in the church. I don't mean like in the church praying or anything like that, but possibly in the church, like buried within the church. But she then mentions the graveyard. Okay? Why would they be in the graveyard of the church? Again, British tradition. At least up through the 19th century, changed quite a bit in the 20th century. Only those who were members of a parish, or only those who were baptized, were buried in the churchyard. Harry felt a thrill of something that was beyond excitement, more like fear. Okay? So, they make their way across the square because the implication is, the church is somewhere over here and they've got to go through the square to get to the church. And they're halfway across the square and she stops. Harry, look. She was pointing at the war memorial. As they had passed, it had transformed. Instead of an obelisk covered in names, there was a statue of 3 people. A man with untidy hair and glasses, a woman with long hair and a kind, pretty face, and a baby boy sitting in his mother's arms. Snow lay upon all their heads like fluffy white caps. Now notice the image for a moment. The narrator tells us snow is where on them? Just on their heads. Why isn't the snow on James's shoulders? Why isn't the snow, on the man's shoulders, why isn't the snow lying on the baby that the woman is holding? I mean, if the woman's holding a baby, she's holding the baby like this, the whole baby would be covered with snow. But that's not the description.
Magic.
Pardon?
Magic.
Okay, what else? Think of the image again. 3 people in snow is only around the heads. What is she portraying visually? What could the snow around the halo, or nimbus, also what it's called? Harry draws closer. He looks up into his parents' faces. He had never imagined there would be a statue. How strange it was to see himself represented in stone. A happy baby without a scar on his forehead. Okay? So, the war memorial, here at the center of the square, as they get closer to it, transforms into this statue, or these statues. Okay? Still a war memorial, because they're the ones who died in the Great War, so to speak. But what else does it become? Again, what night is it?
It's Christmas Eve.
You have a mother, a father, and a baby. It's like the Holy Family.
Yeah.
Jesus, Joseph, and Mary. Okay.
And at the point of them making that, Harry had just saved the wizarding community from Voldemort.
And look what he's going to do at the end of the book. I mean, to me, this is just sheer genius on Rowling's part. Harry says, come on. When he had looked his fill, and they turn again towards the church. Okay? So they approach the church, and the singing gets louder and louder because of the Doppler effect. As you approach sound waves compress. As you go past the sound waves go farther apart, and it becomes less loud. Okay? In hearing the Christmas carols from the church, It makes Harry think of Peeves and Hogwarts, okay? They go into the graveyard, and Harry says, look, this is an abbot. So earlier when he thought about, I could have had friends growing up here, now he thinks this could be some long-lost relation of Hannah's. And it makes the connection, it makes you think, and maybe he would have known Hannah Abbott from a young age. So they go deeper and deeper into the graveyard. Going deeper and deeper into the graveyard, they get farther and farther away from the church and from the sound of the Christmas carols and such, okay? So, Hermione was 2 rows of tombstones away. She says, Harry, here. Is it? He says, no, but look. And there's the words, Kendra Dumbledore and her daughter Ariana. And there's a quotation. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. Luke 12:34. It's also in Matthew. Okay? And it's a big, long section in Sermon on the Mount, I believe, where Jesus is talking about not laying up treasures here on earth where moth and rust, corrode and etc., but laying up treasures in heaven where nothing can steal, etc. Okay? So Harry starts to think. He cannot help thinking that he and Dumbledore both had deep roots in this graveyard and that Dumbledore ought to have told him so. Yet he'd never thought to share the connection. They could have visited the place together. And Harry imagines coming here with Dumbledore. And what a bond it would have been. What it would have meant to him. But it seemed to Dumbledore that the fact that their families lay side by side in the same graveyard had been an unimportant coincidence, irrelevant perhaps to the job he wanted Harry to do, even though he doesn't know yet what that job fully is. Hermione's looking at Harry. He's glad she can't see his face. He reads the words again. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. He didn't understand what these words meant, indicating he'd never read them before. He'd never seen them before. Dursley never took him to church. Okay? Hermione, you sure? No. So they keep looking. They find a really old gravestone. They see the mark of Grindelwald again. Okay? Harry's like, I don't really care. Page 326 or so. It says, Ignotus something. Okay? Harry, I'm going to keep looking for my parents. So we're told, the next long paragraph, at the end of it, deeper and deeper amongst the graves he went, and every time he reached a new headstone, he felt a little lurch of apprehension and anticipation. The darkness and the silence seemed to become, all of a sudden, much deeper. Harry looks around because he thinks there's got to be Dementors. Right? Because Dementors make you feel that way. Then realized the carols had finished, and that the chatter and flurry of churchgoers were fading away as they made their way back into the square. Notice the connection Rowling makes between the stopping of singing of Christmas carols and the effect of the resulting silence on Harry, juxtaposed with the effect of Dementors. So if that has the same effect, the stopping of the singing of Christmas carols, then the singing of Christmas carols is the opposite effect. If Dementors take away all hope, joy, love, etc., then the Christmas carols do what? They bring those things, probably because of the words of the message. Someone inside the church had also just turned off the lights. And then Hermione says, Harry, they're here. James Potter, born 27 March 1960, died 31 October 1981. Lily Potter, born 30 January 1960, died 31 October 1981. The last enemy that shall be destroyed is death, from 1 Corinthians 15:26. In the big, long passage about, if the resurrection isn't true, then the Christians are the ones who should be most, put out and ashamed, etc., for believing a lie. So Harry reads those words. He goes, isn't that a Death Eater idea? Hermione, it doesn't mean defeating death in the way that Death Eaters mean it, Harry. It means, living beyond death. living after death. Notice she says it means you know. But Harry doesn't know. Why does Hermione know? Why does Hermione understand that? Has Hermione read the Bible? We have no idea. But Hermione is raised in kind of a modern British household, but Hermione's a curious person. I mean, she's aware of what's going on around her. And even though England today, Britain today, is very much a post-Christian nation, at this time of year, you can't go anywhere without hearing Christmas carols, seeing Christmas tree, all the decorations, the whole 9 yards. Okay? And so she would have been aware of that. And the same thing, with Easter. It's still culturally celebrated. Has no meaning, but it's culturally there. Notice she doesn't use the word resurrection. She just says living beyond death, living after death. What should that make Harry think? To the well-organized mind, death is but the next great adventure. Or what Luna said. But they were not living, thought Harry. They were gone. The empty words could not disguise the fact that his parents' moldering remains lay beneath snow and stone, indifferent, unknowing. Notice, their remains are indifferent and unknowing. Indifferent, don't give a damn. Okay? Juxtapose this image with Harry looking into the mirror of Erised. Because when he first looks in and he sees the people, he doesn't understand, he doesn't know who they are. He turns around, nobody there, he looks again, the woman's now crying. He does this, okay? The man reaches over, now she's smiling, crying, waving. That's not indifference. That's not unknowing. And tears came before he could stop. This is around 326, if you're interested.
328.
328?
Yeah.
Thank you. And tears came before he could stop them, boiling hot, then instantly freezing on his face. And what was the point in wiping them off or pretending? He let them fall, his lips pressed hard together, looking down at the thick snow, hiding from his eyes the place where the last of Lily and James lay. But not really. Why not? You shook your head no.
Just for starters, they live on Harry.
Exactly. Harry's there. He's the last of Lily and James. Bones now surely or dust, not knowing or caring that their living son stood so near. Now, I don't think that's referring to the bones or dust. I think James and Lily's, consciousness, souls, whatever you want to call it. That their living son stood so near, his heart still beating, alive because of their sacrifice, and close to wishing at this moment that he was sleeping under the snow with them. To me, that brings back the image of what is his heart's desire when he looks into the mirror the first time. Okay? Hermione holds his hand, and notice, he, taking deep, sobbing kind of gasps of breath, is trying to regain control. The virtue that he's told to master in book 5, self-mastery, self-control, okay? He's still working on. Why? Because it's a lifetime kind of process. And he thinks, I should have brought something for them. Okay? But Hermione raises her wand and she does a Christmas wreath with roses. And Harry puts it on his parents' grave. Why a wreath? Why not a bouquet?
Is it almost kind of symbolic of like an infinite circle of life?
It's very much what it is. It represents an eternity, okay? And it's roses because roses are the flower of passion and of love, Okay? So, he gets up, they make their way back towards the church. Chapter 17. They notice someone watching them and such. Okay. They see the house, Harry's house, where he grew up. And he starts talking to what he thinks is Batilda Bagshot. Okay? We're going to skip a bunch again. Shoot, I don't have a page number, so plus 60. Nagini almost gets him. Big, long memory, I guess is what you call it, around 340, 342 maybe, okay? Harry sees what Voldemort sees when Voldemort approached on October 31st, 1981. Little boy says, "Nice costume, mister," goes to the house, okay? He forces the door open. Avada Kedavra, James Potter falls to the ground. He could hear screaming from the upper floor. Goes upstairs, forces the door open. He sees his mother. She drops her son into the cot behind her, throws her arms wide. In other words, she gets in front of him like this, kind of forming a cross in front of him. "Not Harry, not Harry, stand aside, not Harry. Have mercy, not Harry. I'll do anything. Stand aside, stand aside." Okay. He points the wand into the boy's face. He wanted to see it happen, the destruction of this one inexplicable danger. Child begins to cry. It had seen, he was not changed. He didn't like it, the crying, and then he was broke. And Harry sees down and he sees something incredible, right? He picks up the smashed photograph. There he was, the unknown thief, the thief he was seeking. That is, this is Voldemort after he gets cursed from the curse that rebounds on him, seeing who's the unknown thief? Grindelwald. Okay? Isn't it? So, Hermione rescues him. And second to the last page, Harry asks, "Where's my wand?" And there's his wand broken nearly into fix it. And she's like, "Can't." Okay. He tries Expelliarmus. It doesn't work much. Doesn't work very well. Chapter 18. Life and Lies for Albus Dumbledore. This is Harry's low point. This is where he reaches the bottom of the barrel. Look at this description. The sun was coming up, so what day is it now?
The next day.
It's Christmas Day. This is Christmas morning. Everything from arriving at Godric's Hollow, seeing the War Memorial transform into the quote-unquote Holy Family, the Potter family, all the stuff with Batilda Bagshot, etc., or Nagini, all happens on Christmas Eve. Sun was coming up. The pure, colorless vastness of the sky stretched over him, indifferent to him and his suffering. Now, what is that supposed to kind of imply? The pure, colorless vastness of the sky. Notice we're not told that the sky is blue or dark. It's lacking color. Okay? And it is what? It is indifferent. The sky there kind of stands for the whole universe. It is indifferent to him and his suffering. He sat down in the tent entrance, took a deep breath of clean air. And the narrator says, this isn't Harry thinking. This is now the narrator telling us, simply to be alive, to watch the sun rise over the sparkling snowy hillside, ought to have been the greatest treasure on earth. Now, greatest treasure on earth, remember the passage that was inscribed on the tombstone for Kendra and Ariana Dumbledore. There where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And it's in that passage where Christ talks about laying not up treasures on earth, but in heaven and such. So being alive to watch the sunrise, we're told, should have been the greatest treasure on earth. Why?
Because they just narrowly escaped Voldemort.
Okay. Because they just narrowly escaped death. Why else? Take that one step farther, because that's really close. Because he is alive. Just the the sheer fact of living is a treasure. Yet he couldn't appreciate it. Why not? Notice, colon. The colon tells us everything that comes after it is telling us why Harry doesn't appreciate it. His senses had been spiked by the calamity of losing his wand. He looked out over a valley blanketed in snow, distant church bells chiming through the glittering silence. Why are the church bells chiming? It's Christmas morning. There is a service, probably, going on in this country parish church. And Harry's holding his arms like this, and he's digging his fingernails in, trying to resist physical pain. And we're told the physical pain he's endured. He spilled his own blood more times than he could count. He'd lost all the bones in one arm. The journey had given him scars to his chest, forearm, to join those on his hand and forehead. In other words, he's almost got, the 5 wounds of Christ. Forehead, crown of thorns, hands, chest, spear in the side. Only one he's missing are the heels or the feet. But never until this moment had he felt himself to be fatally weakened, vulnerable, and naked. Fatally, notice, weakened, vulnerable, naked. In other words, totally defenseless, totally powerless, almost like, really emphasizing the almost like, crucified. Okay? As though the best part of his magical power had been torn from him. He knew what Hermione would say if he tried to say any of this. She would say, well, the wand's only as good as the wizard. But she was wrong. His case was different. She had not felt the wand spin like the needle of a compass. We talked about that earlier. Okay? He talks about the wand moving of its own accord. He had lost the protection of the twin cores. What are the twin cores?
The phoenix tail feather that came from Fox.
The phoenix tail feather that came from Fox. And what did Dumbledore say about Fox? Why did Fox come visit in the Chamber of Secrets? Come to help Harry. Because he showed loyalty to Dumbledore. Okay? What's the other part of his wand? Holly. Okay? Which is deadly. Nope, take it back. I was thinking you. So, he keeps thinking about this, and he's just spitting nails angry at Dumbledore for not explaining anything. Okay? And she gives Harry a pristine copy of The Life and Lies of Albus Dumbledore. It was sitting in the room when they'd been in the house, and Harry thanks her for saving him. And then we get the big, long passage from The Life and Lies of Dumbledore. We get the letter to Gellert Grindelwald, okay, where we discover what about Dumbledore. They're going to take over the world. For what purpose?
But all their reasoning is the greater good.
The-
That wizards have this power that gives them the right to rule.
Which idea we saw where previously?
Magic is might.
Magic is might. In other words, there's really no difference between the young Grindelwald and Dumbledore ideology and the current Voldemort ideology. It's just a matter of degree. You take both of them to their logical extension, or extend them to their logical conclusion, and what do you end up with? A total totalitarian state. I mean, you want to talk about fascism? Here it is, okay? Hermione starts to talk. Harry, but don't go there. Some inner certainty had crashed down beside him. It was exactly as he had felt after Ron left. Notice, some inner certainty. What was the inner certainty? What did Auntie Muriel's comments do to Harry's thoughts about Dumbledore?
Word kind of got used as don't let them taint your view.
They tarnished it. They nested in his mind. Now, this certainty he had about Dumbledore,
It's gone.
and why? Dumbledore's own words. He believed him the embodiment of goodness and wisdom. What's the problem there?
Dumbledore wasn't always good and wise.
Showing
That everyone has their moments. Not everyone is just this wise.
Okay. Keep going. What does Hagrid explain to Harry in Chamber of Secrets and, to some extent, Goblet of Fire about Dumbledore? What does Dumbledore say about people?
Everyone deserves a second chance.
Everyone can change. Dumbledore is the living embodiment of that. Okay? What would our world, leave the fantasy world, what would we call Dumbledore's ideology in his youth? What's it kind of similar to?
They're right.
The Nazis. It's very much that. And yet, he changed. He abandoned all that. Okay? All was ashes. Everything he thought about Dumbledore, poof, burst into flame. Okay? How much more could he lose? He's lost Ron, now he's lost Dumbledore, now he's lost his own wand. But why the image of ashes?
His whole world was burned to the ground.
Okay. Keep going.
Phoenix.
The Phoenix. The Phoenix is reborn out of those ashes. And so Hermione tries to start explaining and talking with Harry. And she mentions, the slogan, for the greater good. For the greater good was even carved over the entrance to Nurmengard. Now, why does Rowling choose the name Nurmengard? What does it sound similar to in our world? You have to know a little bit about World War II. Nuremberg. The Nuremberg rallies, first of all, where Hitler rose to fame, where he spoke, the speeches were broadcast, etc. And then at the end of World War II, that's where the Allies held the trials for the Nazi sympathizers, for the SS generals, etc., the Nuremberg trials. Why? That's where he rose to power. That's where that ideology is going to be buried. Okay? Harry doesn't know what Nurmengard is, so she explains. It's the prison Grindelwald had built to hold his opponents, and it is where Grindelwald was held after Dumbledore defeated him. Okay? They talk back and forth about Dumbledore and his desire for power and everything. And Hermione says, he changed, Harry. He changed. It's as simple as that, page 362. Maybe he did believe these things when he was 17, but the whole of the rest of his life was devoted to fighting the dark arts. Dumbledore was the one who stopped Grindelwald, the one who always voted for Muggle protection, Muggle-born rights, who fought you-know-who from the start, and who died trying to bring him down. What's the point? What is Rowling's point? Never assume that because someone has some deep, dark something in their background, that means that they are always motivated by that. It's the same kind of idea. Take that back. It's a very similar idea to what Lloyd Alexander does in the book The Black Cauldron. Okay? In the Chronicles of Prydain series. I teach this when I teach a fantasy lit course. You have a character in Chronicles of Prydain, or in the Black Cauldron, named Lord Morgant. Pretty sure that's his name. Who, all of his life, fights for the side of good and is noble and, virtuous and all that kind of stuff. And at the end of his life, he gets twisted. He gets twisted for desire for the Black Cauldron and the power it will give him. Well, at the very end of the novel, when the battle is over and the Black Cauldron is destroyed and all that kind of stuff, a character says Morgant should receive an honorable burial. When others say, why? He's responsible for the death of, XYZ and a lot of people, et cetera, et cetera. And the character says, because we should look at his life in totality. We shouldn't say that because he did one bad thing, that wipes out everything. It's like what Shakespeare says in Julius Caesar. The good men do is often turd with their bones. The evil lives on afterwards. Okay? And what he's suggesting there is we've got it backwards. We should look at the totality and the good and not let a bad thing outweigh the good. Okay? So she says, after explaining it, the reason you're angry is because Dumbledore never told you any of this. Harry, maybe I am. Look what he has for me, Hermione. Risk your life, Harry. Again, don't expect me to explain everything. Just trust me blindly. Or, put that another way, that Harry has said several times through the novel so far. Choose what to believe. Trust that I know what I'm doing. Trust me even though I don't trust you. Never the whole truth. Never. His voice cracked with the strain. They stood looking at each other in the whiteness and the emptiness. I can't help but think that's foreshadowing for King's Cross. Only here, Harry's fully alive. And Harry felt they were as insignificant as insects beneath that wide sky. The universe, in other words, doesn't make any sense. If they're as insignificant as insects, that means, in Harry's mind, their lives have no meaning whatsoever. He loved you, Harry. I know he loved you. Harry, I don't know who he loved, Hermione, but it was never me. Even though Dumbledore, in book 5, talked about the flaw in his plan. The flaw in his plan was that he came to love Harry too much, so that he didn't tell him what he should have told him sooner, because he wanted to protect Harry a little bit longer. Okay? So, chapter 19. So that's Harry. Life sucks and then you die mentality. And then we get chapter 19, the Silver Doe. What's the purpose of chapter 19? Louder?
The sword.
The sword, which represents, in terms of the arc of this story, what?
It's kind of, to me, it's almost like the proverbial turning point of they've been fighting this battle. How do I do this?
It's very much the turning point. This is the beginning of the arising of the Phoenix. The Phoenix here being Harry. I mean, in one sense, Harry metaphorically kind of dies in Godric's Hollow. This is the beginning of Harry's rebirth, so to speak. Not like the death and rebirth we will see later in the novel. So, they go to the Forest of Dean. And we're told, the paragraph that begins, here too snow lay on the trees. Second to last sentence, Harry felt as though he was recuperating from some brief but severe illness. There's a phrase in Christian tradition, the dark night of the soul, okay? And what the phrase means is every quote-unquote real Christian has to go through this kind of experience. It's Christ in the Garden of Gethsemane. Father, if it's possible, take this cup from me. Not as I will, but as thou wilt. It's Peter betraying Christ 3 times before the crucifixion and then being forgiven, etc. And there's, a whole litany you could go on of saints who experience this kind of thing. Mother Teresa had this experience in 1947 on a train where she said in letters, she saw Jesus and he spoke to her and he gave her, a charge. Care for the poor, the outcasts, the downtrodden of Calcutta. And then she never had any experience of God for the next 50 years. She thought God had closed the door on her. Didn't exist. And yet she remained going on doing what he did. Doing what she did. That's the dark night of the soul. So, 2 nights go by, 2 days and nights go by. Harry doesn't sleep well. Okay. 3rd night comes. Notice the symbolism. And he's sitting out at the entrance to the tent, and he sees a light. A bright silver light appears, moving through the trees. He kind of watches it, and then the source of light comes out from the trees, and he sees it's a silver white doe. Page 365, I think. And steps towards him. And Harry looks at it like, I know you somehow. Something was familiar. He thinks about shouting for Hermione, but he doesn't, and he follows the doe. It leads Harry to a frozen pool of water. I should throw this up, by the way. I'll talk about that in a minute. Leads Harry to a frozen pool of water. He holds up his wand, and he sees something gleaming. And it's the frozen pool, but the surface is cracked. Okay? He looks closer. The ice reflected his distorted shadow in the beam of wand light, but deep below the thick, misty gray carapace, something else glinted. A great silver cross. All right? Do we know how many days this is after Christmas?
Not entirely sure.
We don't. There is a tradition in the church. It's much more practiced in the East, in the Orthodox Church, than it is anymore in the West. It used to be partly 1,000 years ago in the West. And that is on the Feast of Epiphany, which is January 6th. In the Eastern Church, it's still done around the world. At the ritual for what's called the Great Blessing of Waters, okay? The priest will go out and say a bunch of prayers, and he'll bless the water with the cross, etc. And then we'll throw the cross out into the water. And all the young men of the parish will, strip down to their skivvies and jump in the water. Now, this is fine if you're in Tarpon Springs, Florida, on the Gulf Coast, where, it's the Gulf. Ooh, the water gets cold to like 70 during the winter. It's a hell of a lot different if you live in Russia, where they do it. And they'll break the ice in streams, in ponds and lakes, and the priest will throw it out there, and these guys will jump into the literally freezing cold water to retrieve the cross. So, there's a great silver cross, we're told, with red, like rubies. Okay? So, it's a cross with red blood imagery. Harry drops to his knees. Why? I mean, symbolically, this could be an act of humility. But why else?
Trying to get a better look at it.
You gotta get closer to it, exactly. Try to get a better look at it. A glint of deep red, and now, because he gets closer to it, it was a sword with glittering rubies in it. It's the sword of Gryffindor, which we'd heard about previously because Neville, Ginny, and Luna broke into Snape's office to try to recover this. Okay? So, Harry sits there, he goes, Oxio. He didn't think it was going to work, and it didn't. Is that why it didn't work? Because he didn't expect it to? Or is it because he doesn't have his wand, he's using Hermione's? Anyways, and then he's louder?
Or maybe because it's gotten to.
And then he goes, help. Like, help me, Obi-Wan. Help me, Albus Dumbledore, but you're dead and moldering and you, okay? He doesn't believe that's going to help either. So he breaks the ice with the wand, and it cracked with a sound like a bullet in the silence, the surface of the water. As far as Harry could judge, it wasn't deep, but to retrieve the sword, he would have to submerge himself completely. So it's not deep, but it's deeper than however tall Harry is. So he's going to have to get down into it, and even if it's only, 6 feet deep or 5 feet deep, he's going to have to bend down and go head under. Why is this significant? What's the image?
Baptism.
Yeah, it's baptism. Okay? And it's, in a sense, very real baptism, other than there not being any priest or minister present, in that he goes under, and what happens to him?
The locket starts choking him.
It's like bad juju, between the locket and the sword of Gryffindor. The locket doesn't want to get close. Okay? So, Harry's being killed, he's dying under the water, and someone comes and rescues him. And we're told Harry had no strength to lift his head and see his Savior's identity, not rescuers, okay? And it's Ron. Okay? They talk back and forth a bit. Ron says, I'm back. There was a pause in which the subject of Ron's departure seemed to rise like a wall between them. Yet he was here. He had returned. He had just saved Harry's life. Okay? So Hermione shows up, and Ron destroys the locket, okay, with the sword of Gryffindor. So now there are, how many Horcruxes destroyed? Ring, diary, locket. Okay? Chapter 20. We'll go through, the rest of it we'll go through a lot more quickly. Xenophilius Lovegood. Why do they go talk to Xenophilius?
Because Hermione saw the sign of the Hallows in the book, and Harry remembered it from the wedding.
So we're going to go find out what it's about. Chapter 21, Tale of the Three Brothers. Okay? So he's mentioned the Deathly Hallows. And Harry's like, Deathly Hallows? That's right. You haven't heard of them? Not surprised. Very few wizards believe. Notice, very, very few wizards believe. He doesn't say very few wizards have heard of them. Witness that knuckle-headed young man at your brother's wedding. Who's the knuckle-headed young man? Yeah, it's a pretty good description of him. Okay? One simply uses the symbol to reveal oneself to other believers in the hope that they might help one with the quest. What's the symbol? This. Okay? Very much the same as, the fish that Christians, early period especially, used to indicate that they were Christians to other Christians when Christianity was outlawed. So Harry's like, don't understand. Believers seek the Deathly Hallows. Hermione, what are they? So he says, you're familiar with the tale of Beedle the Bard. Harry says no. Ron and Hermione say yes. Ron's heard it because Ron grew up in a wizarding house where he was probably read fairy tales. Hermione, because Dumbledore left her the book. Why did Dumbledore leave her the book?
She read it.
So she'd make this connection. The reason, question on the exam. The reason Dumbledore left the book was not the reasons that were given in the will. Why not? The will said so that she might find it entertaining and instructive.
He had to be cryptic enough for the ministry wouldn't put two and two together.
Exactly. Okay. So she pulls out the story in the read of the tale of the three brothers. Okay. We get to the end of the story, and he says, "Well, there you are, Hermione. Sorry. Those are the Deathly Hallows." And he draws it: the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Cloak of Invisibility. Together, the Deathly Hallows. Hermione, but there's no mention of the words Deathly Hallows. How do you get that? What does that show us about Hermione's? How does Hermione approach books?
Like they're facts, absolute truth, like the Holy Grail.
Okay, keep going. In surface level.
Yeah.
Literal. Okay? She doesn't see metaphor. She doesn't see symbolism. She doesn't see imagery. Okay? He says, well, of course not. That is a children's tale told to amuse rather than to instruct. Those of us who understand these matters, however, recognize that the ancient story refers to three objects or hallows, which, if united, will make the possessor master of death. Okay? He mentions Luna again. Luna's not coming. And then he says, because Hermione's like, I don't get this. He says, you are, I gather, not unintelligent, but painfully limited, narrow, closed-minded. How is Hermione closed-minded?
She doesn't want to believe anything there's not hard proof about.
She would be considered, in our world, a logical positivist, branch of philosophy from the early 20th century, that essentially says only those things that can be proven, logically, rationally argued, are real and true. Okay? It kind of really linked to nihilism. Because how do you logically prove love? How do you logically prove loyalty? How do you logically prove all the virtues? Okay? So, they talk back and forth, and he mentions the cloak of invisibility. He says it's a true cloak of invisibility, not a traveling cloak imbued with a disillusionment charm or carrying blah, blah, blah. He says we're talking about a cloak that really and truly renders the wearer completely invisible and endures eternally, giving constant and impenetrable concealment no matter what spells are cast at it. Okay, notice the first part of that. Permanent, constant, impenetrable concealment. And yet,
Dumbledore was able to see Harry.
and so was Magi. They didn't use spells. They were just able to see. Okay? How many cloaks have you seen like that? And she's like, oh, I can think of one, But, so, she said, okay, we'll say for the sake of argument, cloak exists. What about the resurrection stone? What of it? How can that be real? Prove that it's not. And she's like, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, what do you want me to do? Go hold all the rocks in the world? I mean, you could claim anything's real if the only basis for believing in it is that nobody's proved it doesn't exist. And he goes, very good. You're starting to open your mind a little bit. My wife and I were just watching something. Last night before, same kind of idea was applied, okay? and then the elder wand. So they talk about the elder wand, they talk about the three brothers who were actually real people, the three Peveril brothers, Antioch, Cadmus, and Ignotus. The original the original owners of the Hallows. Okay? He asks if they'll stay for dinner, etc. He goes off and leaves for a moment, page 414. Harry, Ron, and Hermione, talk among themselves. And Hermione says, they're talking about superstitions. Harry and I were raised by muggles. We were taught different superstitions. It's just a morality tale. It's obvious which gift is best, which one you choose. Notice Hermione is saying everybody would assume the same thing. And they each speak simultaneously, and notice they each choose a different Hallows. Okay? So, why does Ron want the cloak? Why does Hermione want the cloak? Why does Ron want the wand? And why does Harry want the stone? Start with the last one first. It's pretty easy. Bring Mom and Dad back. Bring Sirius back. Lupin? Not yet. Okay? Ron, the wand.
That also goes back to the mirror of Harry said if he wanted to be the best of his brothers.
In power. We always thought Percy was the one who wants power. Ron wants. Why does Hermione want the invisibility cloak?
I mean, it's not like she really has anyone she wants to bring back.
It's the one she
Right.
It's the one she has the most practical use for.
Why, though? Why does Hermione want to be invisible? What does everybody say about Hermione?
She's a know-it-all. It could be almost like an escape from the time.
Exactly. It'd be, to become anonymous, so to speak. I mean, Hagrid says, what? First book, second book. Not a spell you can't do, etc. Okay? So, they talk about the wand and such, and they leave. Hermione says, chapter 22, the Deathly Hallows, around 425. It's a bunch of nonsense. Ron says, hang on, Chamber of Secrets is supposed to be myth. It was real. Hermione, but it can't exist. Ron, you keep saying that. But one of them can, Harry's invisibility cloak. It's a story, says Hermione, a story about how humans are frightened of death. If surviving was as simple as hiding under the invisibility cloak, we'd have everything we need already. Not really, though. Okay? Harry, I don't know, we could use an unbeatable wand. There's no such thing. But there have been loads of wands, etc., etc. And that's when Harry says, when my wand connected with you-know-who's, it made my mom and dad appear. And Cedric, Hermione, but they weren't really back from the dead, were they? Those kinds of pale imitations of life. I'm going to give everybody, there's only two of you to hear this, but I'm going to give everybody 2 points, extra points on the exam, because I think the question that I put about nearly headless Nick wasn't clearly phrased or something. It had 2 parts. Why is nearly headless Nick a ghost? Well, the first part is he was afraid to die. The second part is he chose a poor imitation of life, being a ghost. It wasn't enough to just say he was afraid to die, so he became a ghost. You had to use that poor imitation of life. That's what she says here, all right? These kinds of pale imitations aren't the same. But the girl in the tale, what? Didn't really come back, did she? Once people are dead, they belong with the dead. But the second brother still got to see her and talk to her. Go back to the epigraph at the beginning of the book. The one by William Penn about, the dead are like crossing the sea, but they're still alive with us and such. Okay? So now what do they start doing? Equating or making connections or bringing together the two aspects of their quest. What's the first aspect? What did they think their whole purpose was? Horcruxes. Now, Hallows. Okay? And Harry and Hermione talk about what they saw on the tombstones. They'd seen whose tombstone? He noticed, okay. Harry thinks Dumbledore left him the ring in the snitch. Not right, but let him think that. They keep thinking. Harry, doesn't sleep very well. Page 434. Harry's thinking about the wand. Where's the Elder Wand? Where was it hidden? Where was Voldemort searching now? He wished his scar would burn and show him. Hermione wouldn't like that idea, but then she did not believe. Xenophilius had been right in a way, limited, narrow, closed-minded. The truth was that she was scared of the idea of the Deathly Hallows, especially of the Resurrection Stone. What room in the Ministry of Magic, in the Department of Mysteries, does Hermione fear? Death. Harry pressed his mouth again to the snitch. Okay? He remembers Luna in Azkaban, if only they could rescue her, etc. And we're told, and he goes on, if only there was a way of getting a better wand. Next long paragraph begins, they packed up the tent next morning, right in the middle. He could think only of the Deathly Hallows. It was as though a flame had been lit inside him that nothing, not Hermione's flat disbelief, nor Ron's persistent doubts, could extinguish. What's the flame? Hope, faith, trust, belief. Okay. He thinks of the quote, the last enemy that shall be destroyed is death. I thought it was who we were supposed to be fighting, Hermione retorted. Okay? And he sees something. He has a vision. His scar had begun to prickle. He sought solitude whenever it happened, but was disappointed by what he saw. The visions he and Voldemort were sharing had changed in quality. They had become blurred, shifting as though they were moving in and out of focus. Why? Why does Harry no longer see these visions as clearly as he did before?
Is it possible that as they're destroying more Horcruxes, Voldemort's kind of going further and further from...
That could be. That could be. I don't think that's it, but that could be it.
Voldemort doesn't want that connection to be there anymore.
Does Voldemort have that kind of control? Does Voldemort know about the connection he has with Harry? I don't mean that Harry's able to see into, I mean that Harry's a Horcrux.
Probably not.
Probably not, I think you're right.
I think if he knew, he wouldn't be so determined to kill him.
Could it be that the reason the visions are getting spotty is because of what's happening in Harry? The increasing faith, hope, trust, belief, etc. So what's the image he sees? Harry was just able to make out the indistinct features of an object that looked like a skull and something like a mountain that was more shadow than substance. What is this? It's the only time it's mentioned, and nothing is ever said about it again. An image of a skull and a mountain. I don't know if my reading is correct, or if it's because of my latent Christianity. There is reference in the New Testament to a mountain and a skull. It's called Golgotha. It's where the crucifixion happens. It's called the place of the skull, and it's on a mountain. can't see any other reason for this, because nothing is done with it. Nothing is said about it. Okay? So, they go on, they listen to Potter Watch, or they overhear Potter Watch, Faith 440 and such. They hear Lee Jordan. They hear Kingsley Shacklebolt. They hear Lupin. Okay? They hear about the conversations about, good witches and wizards are trying to save muggles and such. And Kingsley says every human life is worth the same and worth saving, etc. Okay? They hear Lupin talk about the boy who lived remaining a symbol of everything for which we are fighting, triumph of good, power of innocence, the need to keep resisting, etc. Okay? And then they get caught. They get taken to Malfoy Manor. Okay? Gonna skip a bunch. Draco's home. Why?
It's Easter holiday.
It's the Easter holidays. It's not spring break. Again, I just, kind of find that interesting. Why don't they immediately know this is Harry?
Harry, or not Harry, Hermione's.
Hermione put a hex on him so his face is all disfigured. And so they get Draco to go up to Harry and take a really good close look. And what does Draco say? I don't know. But just before that, Harry sees Draco's face up close beside Lucius Malfoy's. 372 and 84 is going to be 456, probably more like, what page is it on? 458 or so? Harry saw Draco's face up close, now right beside his father's. They are extraordinarily alike, except that while his father looked beside himself with excitement, Draco's expression was full of reluctance, even fear. Why? What does Draco know will happen?
They'll try and kill Harry.
Okay, or they'll deliver him to Voldemort, which, well,
Either kill Harry.
So, Bellatrix, starts to torture Hermione and stuff. The others get taken downstairs, and who do we see downstairs?
Luna and Ollivander.
Luna and Ollivander and Griphook. Okay. And who shows up? Dobby, of course, but before Dobby.
Oh,
Wormtail. Wormtail. And Harry says, "You're going to kill me?" This is just a few pages before the end of the chapter. 77, 76, 75, 74, 73, 70, around 471 or so. "You're going to kill me after I saved your life? You owe me, Wormtail." And the silver fingers slacken. And they go back to Wormtail's throat. And Harry tries to stop Wormtail from killing himself. Pettigrew was reaping his reward for his hesitation, his moment of pity. He was being strangled before their eyes. Okay? Griphook talks about the sword that Ginny and Luna and Neville try to get being a fake. Dobby comes and rescues them. Okay? Last page of the chapter. They arrive at Shell Cottage, and there's Dobby swaying. Harry calls for help. He did not know or care whether they were wizards or muggles, friends or foes. All he cared about was that a dark stain was spreading across Dobby's front, that he had stretched out his thin arms to Harry with a look of supplication. Remember Dobby's initial words to Harry. Harry was what? He was a beacon in the darkness. He was a savior for the downtrodden, etc., etc. And so he now raises his hands like in prayer. Harry Potter. And then he dies. Okay? The elf had gone where he could not call him back, we're told. Harry feels Voldemort's rage, but his grief for Dobby seemed to diminish it. Why? What is his grief for Dobby really? Love. And Harry says, I want to do it properly, not by magic. That's the burying of Dobby. And we get a long description of his digging. He dug with a kind of fury, relishing the manual work, glorying in the non-magic of it, for every drop of his sweat and every blister felt like a gift to the elf who had saved their lives. Harry's suffering, I think, in the burying of Dobby is a gift to Dobby. It's like Harry honoring Dobby. But what else? While he's doing this, what happens? What happens in Harry's mind? Pieces of the puzzle. It's almost like, they're moving on their own and they just kind of figure themselves out. His scar burned, but he was master of the pain. This is the first time Harry now totally controls it. He felt it, yet was apart from it. He could separate himself from it. He had learned control at last. Learned to shut his mind to Voldemort. The very thing Dumbledore wanted him to learn from Snape. Grief, it seemed, drove Voldemort out. But now he realizes it's not grief, it's love. That is why love will enable Harry to defeat Voldemort. He keeps digging, and we're told understanding blossomed in the darkness. Hallows, Horcruxes, Hallows, like he digs with the spade, Hallows, lifted Horcruxes, and he's putting it all together. He thinks of Wormtail, dead. Why? A small impulse of mercy. Dumbledore knew that. How much more did he know? Okay? Harry wrapped the elf more snugly in his jacket. They all give him clothing, all right? And they put him in the ground. Why do they all give him clothing? Free at last, free at last. Okay? Free of what? Pain, suffering, all that kind of stuff. Do house elves have well-organized minds so that they go on the next great adventure? Don't know. Okay? So they say some final words. Dobby is buried with the inscription, here lies Dobby, a free. Because now he's really free. Elf. And Harry thinks of the things that came to his mind. Okay? He tells Bill he needs to speak to Griphook. He needs to speak to Ollivander. Why? What conclusion has Harry reached? Or what ideas have popped into his mind while digging the grave? He's thought some about the Elder Wand. So what questions does he ask Griphook? Excuse me, Ollivander.
Well, there's kind of a, is it possible that it's real?
And he says, of course, there's historical examples. Okay, how is it passed on?
By taking it in its form.
You have to disarm the person who owns it. Okay, does that mean you have to kill him? No, just disarm. Okay, why Griphook? Talking about the sword. Okay, they get to talking about Gringotts. What's Gringotts known for?
Being secure.
Being secure, those vaults down below where all the good stuff is. And so Harry, sits there, as it were, and he looks out over the ocean. He feels his scar prickling, and he understood then, yet did not understand. Okay, back up. Still his scar prickled, and he knew that Voldemort was getting there too. That is, Voldemort was mentally getting to where Harry's already arrived. Not physically, not yet. His instinct was telling him one thing. What's his instinct telling him? What does Harry know at this point? He knows Dumbledore had the Elder Wand. Instinct says, go back to Hogwarts. Go to the White Tomb. Okay? His brain, quite another. Or is his instinct the one telling him, don't go to the tomb? And the brain, logic, is saying, go get the wand before Voldemort can. The Dumbledore in Harry's head smiled, surveying Harry over the tips of his fingers. Notice, pressed together as if in prayer. Like, come on, Harry, come on, Harry. And Harry thinks, he gave Ron the Deluminator. You understood him. You gave him a way back. You understood Wormtail, too. You knew there was a bit of regret there. If you knew then, what did you know about me? Am I meant to know, but not to? And there's a connection with book 1. This is why he's a seeker. Did you know how hard I'd find that? Is that why you made it all this difficult? So I'd have time to work that out. And Harry sees in his mind Hogwarts. Why? Because he's seeing what Voldemort is seeing. Okay? So, big long talk with Griphook, Ollivander, skipping a bunch. And Harry explains at the very end of the chapter to Ron, Dumbledore had the Elder Wand. Ron, where is it now? Harry, Hogwarts. Let's go get it. Too late. He knows where it is. He's there. But we could have. Harry, no. No, Harry says. And he sank to his knees in the grass. Dumbledore didn't want me to have it. He didn't want me to take it. He wanted me to get the Horcruxes. Why does he sink to his knees in his grass? Again, it's an action of humility. It's not my will. I'm putting somebody else. I'm going to follow what? What little guidance he has from Dumbledore. Okay? Shell Cottage. Harry could not remember, second paragraph, he could not remember ever before choosing not to act. Why? What has Harry been doing all throughout the novels? Saving others, rescuing others. That means an action. Here, he's got to become passive. Okay? Hermione says, you couldn't have done that, Harry. You couldn't have seen into Dumbledore's grave. And he felt he was still groping in the dark. Kind of like Frodo and Sam with Gollum finding their way through the dead marshes. He had chosen his path, but kept looking back. Why? Because he looks back to see the way he has come from. Because he can understand that. It's the path forward that's not as clear. Wondering whether he had misread the signs, whether he should not have taken the other way. It's almost like Harry had read at some point Robert Frost, The Road Less Traveled, and realized, oops, I went off on that direction, and I will be recounting this sometime ages and ages hence. I should have taken the other path. So he's kind of wondering. Ron, 3 days later. Is he dead? Yes, Ron. Talking about Dumbledore, he is really dead. Okay? So, skip a bunch. Gringotts. I'm going to skip Gringotts. They go to Gringotts. What do they get? Hufflepuff's cup. I kind of think that by the time she wrote this, she was already thinking with this book, Warner Brothers park theme rides, because the whole description of getting on the trolley carts and going into, it's a theme park ride. Okay? Final hiding place. No, we're going to skip that. 28, missing mirror. Who do they meet? Aberforth Dumbledore. Why is it titled The Missing Mirror?
Because the mirror that Sirius gave Harry and has been seeing a blue lion for eons is finally found.
And he's kind of thought, is it Dumbledore? Well, it is a Dumbledore, okay? So they meet up with Aberforth. Harry says, I'm not leaving. We're going to Hogwarts. We need to get into Hogwarts. This is plus 107. Somewhere around 560 or so, 561. I've got to do this, you know. Aberforth, let it go, boy, before you follow him. That is Dumbledore. Save yourself. I can't. Why not? Harry's like, well, you're in the Order of the Phoenix. I was. Order of the Phoenix is finished. You know who's won. It's over, etc. They argue back and forth. And then we're told, when Aberforth says, that old Burke, talking about Elphias Doge, Harry kept quiet. He had made his choice while he dug Dobby's grave. He had decided to continue along the winding, dangerous path indicated for him by Albus Dumbledore, to accept that he had not been told everything he wanted to know, but simply to trust. In other words, he's got his answer. He chooses to believe. All right? So, they go on, Aberforth is still like, why are you doing this? And Harry says around 568, because sometimes you've got to think about more than your own safety. Sometimes, and Harry turns the meaning of this other passage, sometimes you've got to think about the greater good. This is war, okay? Lost item. So, room of requirement. Skip a bunch. What's the lost item?
The little diadem of Ravenclaw.
Rowena Ravenclaw, okay. Next chapter, sacking of Severus Snape. We see Harry demonstrate his reason for being in Gryffindor. About 3 pages in. 1, 2, 3, 4 pages in. Okay. Who spits at Professor McGonagall? Okay. Amicus, actually. He spits in her face, and Harry pulls the cloak off, says, you shouldn't have done that, and uses Crucio. McGonagall. Harry, I see what Bellatrix meant. You need to really mean it. That's not what she said. Well, she did say that, but then she qualified that. You need to really mean it means what?
You want to cause pain.
You need to enjoy it. Okay? And McGonagall says, Potter, that was very gallant of you. But don't you realize, Harry, and that's why Harry before that says he spat at you, coming to her defense, etc. Okay? Snape gets sacked, right? And how does he leave Hogwarts?
Jumps out a window and flies away.
Like we're told.
A bat.
Okay. Who shows up just before the end of the chapter?
Order of the Phoenix.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them. I was a fool, so-and-so roared. I was an idiot. I was a pompous prat. I was a ministry-loving, family-disowning, power-hungry moron, says Fred. Yes, I was, Percy admits. Fred, can't say fairer than that. Shake hands, families reunited for a couple hours. Okay, we get the Battle of Hogwarts. We find out about the Bloody Baron, why the Bloody Baron is bloody, okay, which we're not going to talk about because we don't have much time. We get the Battle of Hogwarts and the very last page. All hell's breaking loose. Part of the wall caves in. Hermione was struggling to her feet in the wreckage, and 3 red-headed men were grouped on the ground where the wall had blasted apart. Harry grabbed Hermione's hand as they staggered and stumbled over stone and wood. No, 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 someone shouted. No, Fred, no. And Percy was shaking his brother, and Ron was kneeling beside them, and Fred's eyes stared without seeing. The ghost of his last laugh. Next chapter. The world had ended. So why had the battle not ceased? Why the world had ended? Bless you, bless you. Fred's a constant. Fred's like gravity for Harry. Fred and George. See, George gets wounded at the beginning. Fred's a martyr, a real martyr, right? Fred Weasley could not be dead. The evidence of all his senses must be lying, and yet there's Fred. Okay? Harry talks to Hermione and such. He tells her about Nagini. I'm going to skip a bunch. He sees Draco around 6:55. Harry goes over and finds Voldemort and Snape. Okay? I'm not going to read it all because we don't have time. Harry witnesses Snape's murder. 6:57 now, probably. Voldemort says, the Elder Wand cannot serve me properly, Severus, because I am not its true master. The Elder Wand belongs to the wizard who killed its last owner. You killed Dumbledore. While you live, the Elder Wand cannot be truly mine. Snape raises his wand. You know, Voldemort has him killed. Look at me. Snape takes his memories, gives them to Harry, and we get chapter 33, The Prince's Tale. So, Voldemort calls a little truce. He says, you can dispose of your dead. Harry, you have 1 hour. 1 hour, come to the Forbidden Forest, and if you don't, I will enter the frame. In other words, all hell will be unleashed on earth. Okay? So, Harry goes up to Dumbledore's office with Snape's memory, and he sees Snape's memories. Briefly, what does he see? Go to the earliest.
Him with Lily and Petunia.
He, Lily, and Petunia.
Tells her that she's a witch.
More so he and Lily, yeah. Okay? What kind of relationship do they have?
Best friends.
She calls him Seth. Okay? What does Harry come to understand about Snape's worst memory in this chapter? It wasn't James and it wasn't Sirius holding him upside down. It was calling Lily a filthy little mudblood. I don't need your help, you filthy little mudblood. Okay? What else do we learn about Petunia?
That she wanted to go to Hogwarts.
Oh, she was so jealous of her sister. Okay? So, gets to Hogwarts. He sees his father. Harry does, through Snape's eyes, etc. Okay? We see young Sirius and such. We see older Snape. Snape comes with a warning. Okay? He says Voldemort's coming after Lily Evans, meaning Lily Potter at that point. Okay? And we find out what happened to them. Snape comes back again, full of remorse. What does he agree to do? And what does Dumbledore also agree to do?
Snape will be a double agent
Snape will be a double agent for
for Dumbledore and turn to Dumbledore's protection.
Dumbledore. What else? He'll protect Harry as much as he can. Okay? But what does Dumbledore have to do for him? It's not protection. Never, never tell. This must be between us. Swear it. I cannot bear, especially Potter's son. I want your word. My word that I shall never reveal the best of you. How is it the best of him?
It's showing that he has love. He can love.
Okay, keep going.
That he was so torn up over her death, and now he's going to protect her son, even though he despises his father.
What do you have to do to repair a damaged soul?
Remorse.
Remorse. Contrition. How does Snape show his contrition? He hasn't killed anybody yet. How does he show his real contrition? He's going to protect Harry. In other words, he's going to give up his joy, what joy he might find in life, to do this. And Harry can never know. Okay? He also tells him to keep an eye on Quirrell. All right? We find out about Dumbledore being tempted. What was he tempted by? Because he has. Because he has the wand. Harry has the cloak. Dumbledore doesn't have it at this point. So now he's got the wand and the okay. How long do you think I have? Maybe a year. Now this is July, so time's running out. Okay. Dumbledore, they keep talking. We get to the unbreakable vow. Are you intending to let him kill you? Certainly not. You must do it. Dumbledore, the boy's soul is not so damaged. I would not have it ripped apart on my account. What about mine? What about my soul, Dumbledore? And Dumbledore says, you alone know whether it will harm your soul. Now, it seems to be, Rowling seems to imply, it's not just killing that damages the soul. It's murder. Okay? Why? What's the distinction? What is Snape doing to Dumbledore when he does Avada Kedavra?
He's almost doing him a favor.
Is it euthanasia? I think Rowling would see it that way. I think Rowling probably is totally in support of euthanasia. I'm not. I'm totally against it.
I think this whole ordeal also kind of goes back to the idea of the Cruciatus curse. You can say the words, but it's not going to happen if you don't mean it.
You have to mean it, okay? But what else? What is happening to Dumbledore at that moment when Snape does Avada Kedavra on him?
He's done.
He's already, you could say he's already dead. He's still breathing, but he's dead. So is it, the way I kind of look at end of life kind of stuff, I could be totally wrong about this, is he prolonging death, the death process, or is he prolonging life? Dumbledore is going to be dead within a matter of hours. So is Snape doing Avada Kedavra kind of like just pulling the plug on the life support? That's kind of how I view it. I could be wrong, all right? So Snape agrees to. So they keep talking and they talk about Voldemort's soul. And they talk about minds, okay? And that's when Dumbledore says, Harry must not know until the last moment, until it is necessary, absolutely necessary. What? That part of Lord Voldemort lives inside Harry, we're told. That's gives him the power of speech with snakes, etc. Snape. So the boy must die, and Voldemort must do it. Snape, I thought we were keeping him alive for Lily. See, this is Snape's problem. He's got to keep living for Lily. We protected him. So let me get this right. You've kept him alive so that he can die at the right moment. Don't be shocked, Severus. How many men and women have you watched die? Lately, only those whom I could not save. You have used me, meaning I've spied for you, lied for you, put myself in mortal danger. Everything was supposed to keep Lily Potter's son safe. Now you're telling me you have been raising him like a pig for slaughter? Which is almost the exact same language Harry thought of earlier. This is touching, Severus. Have you grown to care for the boy after all? Expecto Patronum, and what do we see? The silver dove. Dumbledore, after all this time, always, okay? So, what's Harry now know? The forest again. He understood at last he was not supposed to survive. His job was to walk calmly into death's welcoming arms. Along the way, he was to dispose of Voldemort's remaining links to life. What are those remaining links?
Horcruxes.
Which ones?
Well, what's left? At this point, the diadem's been destroyed.
In the
The snake. And then
trees,
the-
can never remember the name of the fire. Yeah, the fire. Okay. So what's left?
The snake and Harry.
Harry and the snake. Does Harry understand what will happen when Voldemort kills him? No. What does he think will happen?
He's just,
He'll
gonna die.
be dead. Dead, dead. No Phoenix, not coming back. Okay? And then we're told, paragraph that begins slowly, very slowly, and it ends. Why had he never appreciated what a miracle he was? Brain and nerve and bounding heart. That, I think, is what the narrator is getting at on Christmas morning. When Harry wakes up, and he should think, what a great gift this is. Okay? So, he goes off. He finds Neville. He tells Neville about Nagini. You find the snake, kill it. Okay? And he heads towards the Forbidden Forest. Around 695 or so. He's thinking, I've never had a home other than Hogwarts. But he was home. Hogwarts was the first and best home he had known. He and Voldemort and Snape, the abandoned boys. Okay? And he makes his way, and he thinks, this isn't so easy. This isn't easy to die. He grabs the snitch. I open up the clothes. Well, this is the clothes. This is the end. He kisses it and says, I'm about to die. And there's the resurrection stone, cracked down the vertical line, representing the Elder Wand. He was about to bring them back. He was about to join them. Not really fetch them, they were fetching him. And who walks with him, kind of, to the forest?
His family.
James, Lily, Sirius, Lupin. Why Lupin? He's not family per se, but he's kind of like an uncle. Lupin, Sirius is godfather, and he asks, will it hurt? Sirius, not at all. Quicker and easier than falling asleep. That is a reference, I think, to John Donne's Holy Sonnet, Death, just look it up. Death be not proud. It's one of his greatest holy sonnets. My dissertation was on this. Okay? So, they walk. Harry meets Voldemort. Voldemort kills him. King's Cross. It's been quite a bit of time. Well, got 7 minutes left. King's Cross. Notice, he wakes up. He's in a mist. Everything's white. He sits up. His body's unscathed. He touches his face. He's not wearing glasses anymore. What else does he notice?
He's not wearing any clothes.
He doesn't have a scar. He's not wearing any clothing. Why doesn't he have a scar?
But this is kind of the place where the short, easy word is perfection.
Okay, why doesn't he have glasses?
He doesn't need them.
He's got a restored body. This is resurrection. Okay? So, he wishes he were clothed, and suddenly he's clothed. He looks around, and it kind of looks like King's Cross, and it becomes King's Cross, so to speak. All right? And there's Dumbledore. But before he sees Dumbledore, he hears a noise, and he turns and he looks at this thing, and it's horrible. It's like a little baby that's been flayed. You cannot help. Notice, Dumbledore says you cannot help, even though Harry hasn't said anything. But he's thought it. He ought to comfort it. You cannot help. So they go for a walk. Harry, you're dead. Then I'm dead too. That is the question. I think not. Okay? Question. Is Dumbledore right?
Sort of.
Okay. Sort of. How so?
I mean, Harry's clearly been hit by the killing curse, and he's at this kind of restored in-between place, but he has the choice if he can go back.
What's the thing? No? The flayed baby thing?
It's the Voldemort.
That's the Voldemort's soul
What
that's
is gonna-
dead.
What is gonna die here, Harry or the
Okay,
soul?
so that's dead, and Harry is here. What could Harry do at this point? We're gonna be told at the end.
He could go on.
He can go on, which Nearly Headless Nick says. I don't know what that means. Or he can go back. Nearly Headless Nick went back to choose his poor imitation. Harry doesn't go back to choose a poor imitation of life because what was killed in Harry? Voldemort. Okay? Does that mean Harry could go on? Yes, it does. Because Harry is also, in a sense, dead. So, Harry says, I let him kill me. Didn't I? You did. So he talks about the soul part, okay? And Dumbledore explains everything about the Deathly Hallows, and how Harry's now master of death, etc., okay? Talks about what happened to his parents, what happened to his mother, his sister. He tells Harry, you're the true master of death. And Harry says, I've got to go back, haven't I? It's up to you. But I've got a choice? Yes. If you want to go on, you'll board a train, because they're at King's Cross, and you'll go on. Read J.R.R. Tolkien's Leaf by Niggle, by the way, which is the short story that goes with the fairy story essay. Kind of gives a good demonstration of this. Harry, you want me to go back? Dumbledore says, yes, there's still something to do. And he tells him, to pity whom? Those who live without love. Cryptic, right? What's he really saying? Show mercy to Voldemort. He's the one who lives without love. So, stop calling me. So, Harry goes back. Narcissa lies to Voldemort. And Harry meets with Voldemort in the Great Hall, page 738. And they talk a little bit, and Harry says, you won't be killing anyone else tonight. You won't be able to kill any of them ever again. Why?
Well, I mean, he's about to be killed.
Okay, why else? Because they've been talking about Harry's mother. Why couldn't Voldemort kill Harry all those years ago?
Sacrifice.
His mother sacrificed herself for Harry. Harry says, I was ready to die to stop you hurting these people. But you did not. I meant to. In other words, when I walked into the Forbidden Forest, he was what? He was sacrificing himself for everybody else. And, okay, stop it. 3 times, same number. So what did he become for everybody else? He became a love charm, like Lily did for him. That's why Voldemort can't kill anyone else. Notice, Snape was too early. I meant to. I've done what my mother did. They're protected from you. Who's the they?
Everybody.
Yeah, it's not just the wizarding world. What has Harry become?
It's Christ-like.
The chosen one, the Messiah, the Savior, Patronus, Potter. Okay? That's why Rowling, if she had this in her mind in 2000, 2001, this is why she couldn't answer the question, how does your Christianity inform your books? Okay? You don't learn from your mistakes, Riddle, do you? You dare? You called him his name. Yes, I dare. I know lots of things about you. Voldemort, love, really, again? Okay? So Harry says, love will save me this time. My love is more powerful than your weapon, etc. And he talks about Dumbledore again, showing loyalty and such. He talks about Dumbledore was already dying when Snape finished him. Okay? So Harry says, you're right, but before you try to kill me, I advise you to think about what you've done. In other words, look inwards. and try for some remorse. Where is Voldemort look for love? Out there. Harry's saying, look inwards, because remorse means showing love for those that one has wronged. What's this? He doesn't expect this. What is Harry showing Voldemort? Love. He's giving him the tools to fix himself. Of all the things Harry had said, beyond any revelation or taunt, nothing had shocked Voldemort like this. It's your last chance. It's all you've got. I've seen what you'll be otherwise. Be a man. Try for some remorse. It's not an accident that Rowling uses language about Harry, Voldemort, and Snape that is kind of like the language J.M. Barrie uses in Peter Pan. What is Peter Pan's problem? He's the leader of the Lost Boys, right? His parents have gone missing, or he has gone missing. What is Peter Pan's problem, though? What do the other Lost Boys get? They all get families at the end. Peter Pan doesn't. Why? He doesn't want to grow up. He doesn't want to face reality. What's Voldemort's problem? He doesn't want to face death, which is the ultimate reality. Okay? So, it all comes down to this, whispers Harry. Does the wand in your hand know its last master was disarmed? Not killed. Disarmed. Because if it does, I'm the true master of the Elder Wand. Red gold glow burst through the window. Why red gold? Sunrise. In Gryffindor. In Fox. I mean, not literally Fox, but the same colors. The light hit both their faces. Avada Kedavra. Notice Harry uses, which is designed to protect the person trying to use the other spell. Voldemort dies. The sun rises. And what are we told? They wanted him there with them, their leader, their symbol, their savior, their guide. He had not slept. He craved the company of only a few of them. But everywhere he went, it's like the scene in, which one? The second Hunger Games movie, I think it is. Second or third. Where Katniss visits that hospital and everybody wants to touch her. Not that she has healing powers. Symbol of hope. I mean, here's Harry, the fulfillment of what Dobby said about him in book 2. Okay? Skip to the very end, 19 years later. And what do we see? King's Cross. What else? Harry and his family. Who else?
Well, you see
Ron, Hermione.
Draco.
Draco nods to Harry. Teddy Tonks. Teddy Lupin.
No.
Okay. Why?
He's kissing Bill and Fleur's daughter.
Okay. Victoria. Why else though? It takes us back, okay, almost to how this begins. We have an orphan. Everything hasn't magically been made perfect. But Draco nodding to Harry indicates what?
Respect.
Respect? Are they drinking buddies? Probably not. But Draco knows he saved me. Do we hear anything about Lucius or Narcissa?
No.
Why does Narcissa lie to Voldemort?
She just wanted her son. She didn't. She loved her son.
What did she ask Harry?
Is Draco alive?
Is Draco alive? And he said yes. Okay. Notice, what does Voldemort frequently say to people? Don't lie to me. The Dark Lord knows.
She lied.
She lied. Is that because she's a good Occlumens? I don't think so. Okay. So, last minute, even though it's over. What's the arc of the story? Think of it this way. What's the arc of the story in the books, and what's the arc of the story in the films? Is it ultimately about revenge? It's not. But, you know, the wacko Christians coming out of the woodwork, they all thought the books were ultimately about revenge, you know, get the guy who killed you. But they're not. That's why Harry offers him the opportunity for contrition at the end, okay? That's why we see at the beginning of this book, Harry saying, but coming from Dumbledore, coming from Dudley, that's like saying, I love you, and then him offering Voldemort the opportunity to fix himself. Just, you know, sheer speculation for a moment. What if Voldemort takes that? How does that change the story? In one sense, it doesn't change it much. Because then we would see Voldemort do what? Take that second, third, fourth chance that Dumbledore suggests, giving everyone. That's why he says, pity the living, go back, do what you can, and above all, those who live without love. Okay? One question. Why did she kill Fred? Is Fred a favored character? A favorite character? Yeah. So why kill him? What might Rowling be trying to say through, obviously, fiction? The people we love are still going to die. Because it's not just Fred, right? Who else? When this book came out, we were invited, students of mine, we were in London, students of mine got tickets to a podcast reveal party at the Waterstones in central London, biggest bookstore in England. This podcast thing was, at that point, was the biggest, you know, radio Harry Potter thing there was. And we were at the Waterstones, and people were lining up. We were there. We got, you know, because we had special tickets, we got there. And then we had to leave at 9 o'clock because they were opening it up again at midnight to hand the books out. And when we left, there was a line a mile long of people getting ready to come get their books at midnight. And there were a bunch of people dressed as characters, obviously. And there was one couple we met dressed as Lupin and Tonks. And it was the next morning when my son and daughter, who were at that point the older two that were reading them, were like, oh, can you just imagine what that couple felt like when they read about Lupin and Tonks, you know, because they both die at the end. It was like, you know, it's life, right? Because that's what happens to Harry's parents. Okay, stop there.